Hello, and welcome to Inkopolis. This is part 3 of the series, and part 3 is about how to properly use the weapon testing area for target training. First, there are 2 things you should know about me. Number 1, I play Splatoon 2 with split Joy-Cons and motion control aiming. This is why my camera gets wobbly sometimes. Number 2, my aim is not as good as it could be, and that will be revealed here whether I want it to or not. But it's good enough to demonstrate, so here we go onto the tutorial. The goal in training is to become perfectly accurate and perfectly consistent. In real matches, you won't always be perfectly successful, as other players will constantly try to evade you and counter-ink you, especially as you rank up. As you probably already know, the weapons test area has 2 target ranges: the stationary target range and the moving target range. The 3 purposes of the stationary target range are weapon orientation, to which the entire previous video was dedicated, snap aiming training, and range training. First, we're going over to the stationary target range, then we will go over to the moving target range. We're going to talk about training snap aiming with movement, and range training because, well, everything is range training. Snap aiming is a skill in which you accurately and instantly swing your targeting reticle onto the opponent. This is my method for training snap aiming. Select a splat charger or splat charger variant. I'm going to use the splat charger because it has the best balance of range, charging time, and ink use. Let's stand in the middle, about here. First, face forward and fully charge the shot. Then, move your reticle over a target so that it lights up. For now, let's just move quickly, but not instantaneously, which is the end goal. Once the reticle lights up, hold it for 1 second, then release the trigger. If you place the reticle too far or too short from the target, correct it. The reason we are counting 1 second before releasing is to practice aiming with commitment and certainty before we shoot. As you practice and play and improve, you will get to a point where you do not need to wait at all. As a side tip, if you are using motion controls and you are finding it difficult to keep your aim steady when releasing the trigger, try simply pointing your trigger finger forward as a way to release. When you can consistently place the reticle on the target without correction, it's time to speed up. For our purposes here, I will define consistent as accurate placement 7 times out of 10. I recommend that you move straight into full speed. As an FYI, snap aiming to a target at full speed is often referred to as flicking. You're probably going to suddenly miss a lot at first. That's normal. It's a difficult thing to do. Just relax, breathe, and be sure to note where you fired the charger so you can correct it. The next step is to adjust your training for weapons that are not chargers. I have played for hundreds of hours, and I am telling you with confidence that most of you will not choose a charger as your main weapon. Despite this, charger training is excellent for your general aim and snap aiming in particular, which is why I made you do it anyway. Because of this, we need to address methods for training everything else. Here we are with the Splattershot Junior, everyone's first weapon. First, ink the whole floor of the stationary target range. We are just doing the most basic of training right now, so we want to give ourselves maximum mobility from the start. Second, you need to range find your weapon of choice. This means you need to spend some time finding the firing position that is at your weapon's effective range. This means being close enough to score full damage instead of drop-off damage. And you need to be close enough to mitigate deviation by filling your deviation box with as much of the target as possible, even if that means standing almost right next to it. Once you understand that range, you can begin actual target practice. Please understand, when you choose a main weapon, you will want your understanding of its effective range to be so complete that you know it on intuition alone. This is going to take many, many hours of playing to achieve, so do not be in a rush to get there. As long as you play with the mindset of constant improvement, you will constantly improve. Focus on your goals, but remain patient. Anyway, back to training. Now that we found our weapon's effective range and ink to the floor, we can begin. For this drill, we will always begin facing forward. Hold ZL to swim in the ink. Swim toward a target, but slightly to the left or right. I recommend firing from a 45-degree angle and trying other angles later. Multiples of 45 make good training angles, such as 45, 90, 135, and 180. When you are within effective range, snap your aim to the target and fire the weapon. Please note, if you are using a roller, you should click to attack first, then snap to the target. Hold the trigger, or continue attacking until the target pops. Do not turn away or stop attacking until the pop is confirmed. When choosing a target on the walkways, keep facing at a level elevation until you are in effective range, as well as keeping the target slightly to the left or right. This will cause you to make more of a sweeping motion, which is a little more challenging, but a critical skill. I strongly recommend you find your aim before shooting, as we previously did with the Splat Charger, because if you start spraying ink too early, you may give away your position and intent too early, and that could cost you dearly in an actual match. It's a lot easier to develop good habits now compared to retraining bad habits later. After cycling through the targets for a few minutes, it's time to plot a route through all of the targets and work your way through them one at a time. Just one route is fine in the beginning, but as you improve, you want to mix things up, eliminating the targets in no particular order. If you mess up somehow, don't start over. Do not start over. Focus on correction. Commitment, confirmation, and flow are a lot more important than perfection. Eventually, you want to be able to quickly cycle through all the targets with good flow and without thinking too much, if at all. That's all you need to know from me about how to properly use the stationary target range to improve your aim. You can continue to improve and grow by devising your own ways of making your practice more challenging. You can also spend time practicing with other weapons, especially ones you don't normally use or have never used. You are only limited by your imagination. Now, let's step over to the moving target range. The moving target range has 4 primary purposes: predictive aiming training, shot tracking training, weapon orientation for one more trait that I did not cover in my previous tutorial, and that trait is shot speed, and range training, because as I may have said before, all training is range training until you understand it perfectly. Before we get into these 4 purposes, let's orient ourselves to the moving target range, as there are some things you need to understand in order to make effective use of it. Here, at the back of the range, we have a column and a ramp. This gives us some cover to play with and a perch for longer range weapons, as well as an elevated platform off which we can practice jump shots at moving targets. When we look out onto the range, there are 3 squid balloons moving at 3 different speeds. Their 3 speeds represent 3 levels of challenge, of course, but they are actually more interesting than that. They represent certain walking speeds. Let's start with the middle balloon. The middle balloon is the exact same speed as your walking speed when you have no walk speed up abilities on your gear. Of course, every player's speed is the same, so that means it is the same speed as any player's walking speed that has no walk up speed abilities on their gear. The fastest balloon, the one all the way in the back, is the same speed as the maximum possible walking speed that you can achieve through gear abilities. At least I believe so. I do not actually have the necessary gear to test that theory, but I do have 3 main abilities and 4 sub-abilities, and the balloon is just a little bit faster than I am. I suspect that with full walk speed up, we would match it. The slowest balloon is about the same speed as walking while holding the trigger on a heavy, slow-firing weapon. For example, when firing the Luna Blaster while wearing no walk speed up gear, you can see that we are walking at the same speed. When using a regular blaster, we are just a tiny bit slower, but the speed is still very, very close. Now, just quickly, because I'm sure you are wondering, this is swim speed compared to the fastest balloon with no swim speed up, which is still a fair bit faster, as you can see. So sadly, we don't have targets that match swimming speeds. Anyway, all the moving target balloons represent the extremities of walk speed that you may encounter while actually playing a match. And the extremities of walk speed are mostly how fast players will be moving while shooting back at you, or while they are inking turf, should you successfully sneak up on them. Depending on the map and players' tactics, they may walk in situations in which they are not returning ink at you, but splatting the opponent is always good, so it doesn't really matter why they are walking in the end. What matters is these balloon speeds translate into actual gameplay in a fairly direct and useful way, which in turn means that spending some time training or warming up here is actually worth our time. First, we are going to train predictive aiming. This is very simple and easy to do with a charger, so long as you can achieve some amount of aiming steadiness with your chosen controller and control method. What follows is my basic method. Begin by standing on the perch after selecting the splat charger. Click and hold ZR to charge your shot. Aim straight ahead while placing your reticle over the path of the closest and slowest target balloon. Wait for the balloon to pass in front of the reticle. When the reticle lights up, release the trigger to fire. The balloon should pop. Repeat until you are thoroughly bored. Seriously, use that metric to decide when to move on, whether that is 1 repetition or 100 repetitions. Now, I know this is very easy, generally, but please bear with me because it's important to understand the process moving forward. Additionally, for those players who have never tried the charger before, or players who are using or are just switching to motion controls, this can be more of a challenge than you suspect. Learning to position the reticle with the stick, or learning to keep your aim stable with motion controls can be a bit of a challenge in the beginning. If you think this is too easy, skip it if you really want, but do not judge. Anyway, when you are done, it's time to move on to the middle speed balloon. Now, if you try to duplicate the procedure for the slow balloon and simply wait for the reticle to light up before shooting, you are probably going to miss the target. There are 3 primary factors that contribute to the fact that we are missing our shots now that we are trying to hit the middle speed balloon. One factor is that, as I have stated, the charger fires almost instantly. There is a very slight delay between the time you release the trigger and the time that the ink shoots out of the charger. The second reason is you. Don't worry, you're not doing anything wrong. It's the natural reality that you can only remove your finger from the trigger almost instantly. However, with a lot of practice, you can get pretty darn fast. The third factor is the one that you cannot control, and it's the one that is the primary reason to develop skill and the perception to execute good predictive aiming. That factor is player movement. Opposing players move how they want to move, not how you want them to move. Because of this, we can't think about shooting when the opponent is in our sights. We have to think about shooting when the opponent is going to be in our sights. This is because your opponents are always going to be moving around, so even when they are in your sights, they will never stay there for long. Now, when we move away from the charger, that idea changes a little bit, but we're going to stick with it for now while we're using a charger. So now, back to the balloon. In order to hit this balloon, we have to release the trigger just before the balloon enters our sights and lights up our reticle. This way, the balloon will be in the right place when the charger shot reaches its destination. I'm going to take a few shots at the balloon and try to narrate when I shoot for your benefit, but the best way to learn this is to do it yourself. A lot. Again, as before, practice this until you are thoroughly bored. When you are, it's time to move on to the final, fastest, and most distant balloon. Can you guess what that means? It means we need to shoot even earlier because we need to shoot when we think the opponent will be in our sights. This balloon is moving faster, so that time will come sooner than with the middle balloon. As with the middle balloon, I'm going to take a few shots at the balloon to demonstrate what you need to do. Now that you know what to do, it's your turn to do it. As usual, practice until you are thoroughly bored. You may become a little frustrated or exasperated if you miss a lot on this balloon. If you do, just breathe, relax, and keep practicing. That's the natural learning process when you are training skills. After you've spent a lot of time practicing those drills and becoming thoroughly bored of them, it's time to do it some more. Don't worry, we're going to change it up a bit. First, we're going to switch weapons to the heavy splatling. As a heads up, we're going to go through these drills with a third weapon, the jet squelcher, for reasons to be explained later. The heavy splatling has a slower shot speed than the splat charger, and that is going to change the way we practice this drills a little bit. Proceed through drilling on all three balloons, just like you did with the splat charger, as I'm about to do. There should be very little difference between the splat charger and the heavy splatling when it comes to hitting the first balloon, as we see here. The difference is a little more clear when we move on to the second balloon. Like the charger, if we wait for the reticle to light up, we will just miss the target. If we anticipate and shoot when we believe the target will be in our reticle, we can hit it, but we won't pop it. This is because of three reasons. Number one, the heavy splatling takes 4 shots to splat. Number 2, all 4 shots do not have the shot speed to reach the target all at once, so it takes longer for the second, longer for the third, and then even longer for the 4th shot to reach the target. And the third reason is that the target is continuously moving, so it's not there anymore by the time all of the necessary shots reach it. This leads us to the next concept we're going to train while in the moving target range, target tracking. While practicing target prediction with the splat charger, we learn to understand that every shot takes some amount of time to reach the target, even if that time is extremely short. Prediction is even more critical for slower weapons, such as a roller, which can also splat in 1 shot, but many weapons take more than 1 shot to splat, and that's why we must also practice target tracking. We have to make sure all shots hit the target as quickly as possible. In short, predictive aiming is a must for all weapons, but you will not succeed for long without developing your skills at target tracking. Now, target tracking is all about control, which means that anyone can become very skilled at it with enough practice. We will practice controlling the weapon reticle while matching the speed of the target balloon. If you are using motion controls, you can and should practice matching the target speed precisely. That's your training goal. If you are using stick aiming, then you want to keep your reticle in front of the target's movement path with small movements so that you do not get too far ahead, as that will give your opponent the opportunity to change direction and possibly escape from you. If you want to go that route, I recommend you start by setting stick sensitivity to the lowest setting and gradually increase it as you get better. Keep increasing it until you are happy with the feel of your controls, wherever that setting may lie. After all my rambling, please remember to practice on the third and fastest balloon with the heavy splatling. Let's assume that you have practiced a lot up until this point. As I like to say, until you are thoroughly bored. And move on to the third and final weapon that we are using to practice these drills. This weapon is the Jet Squelcher. The Jet Squelcher is neither a charger nor a splatling, but its range is almost as good. It works like a shooter, and that results in some trade-offs for balance reasons. The main trade-off is shot speed. The shot speed of the Jet Squelcher is very slow compared to the first two weapons we use to practice. This makes predictive aiming more difficult, and target tracking a greater challenge. But you need to be able to do it, so let's go. We're going to do the exact same drills, but with the Jet Squelcher. You should notice right away that you need to lead your target a little more than with the previous two weapons. In real matches, you will miss very frequently with this weapon if your predictive aiming and target tracking are not well trained. This is one of the hardest weapons to use effectively because of its range and shot speed combination. So if you can become consistently good with the Jet Squelcher, most other weapons are going to feel a lot easier. After you have done all that until you are thoroughly bored, we need to introduce a little bit of movement to the skills. And this will be the final stage of the drills for this tutorial. I am just going to quickly show you what to do so you can get to work. The principle you are training here is to swim around a corner or a piece of cover before shooting the same drills that we've been doing the whole time, which is snap aiming, predictive aiming, and target tracking. Also while properly exercising your weapon's range. Aside from adding in some practice that is more like how you move around in a real match, these drills will also expose you to the challenge of aiming and tracking while your opponents are moving at slightly odd angles, as well as timing your attack so that other players do not get in the way of your intended target. Hopefully, you have already spent a lot of time playing around with the three weapons used in this tutorial, so I will just give a basic description of the drill. The drill's basic premise is that you will hide behind cover, then you will choose your moment to attack, then you will move out from behind cover to attack with predictive aiming and track your target until it pops. I'm going to give you the steps and a couple of tips for the weapons to account for their different functions. Step 1. You want to always be swimming in order to remain as mobile and as difficult to track as possible. So put some ink down where you need it to be. I'm going to ink the left, right, and top of this structure. Step 2. Swim to the edge of the platform or around the edge of the walls on the left or right. Aim predictively, meaning where you think the target will be in your sights when the shot gets to it. For the heavy splatling, you cannot effectively swim in the ink around the corner before you shoot. You must charge the weapon and hold the charge behind cover, and then you must walk out from behind cover before you can shoot, like so. This is why a lot of heavy Splatoon players tend to have walk speed up as a skill on their gear. For the Splat Charger, you cannot charge while swimming, but after charging, you can hold that charge for a brief time while swimming, which is indicated by a pale circle that lights up where you are, and it fades as your time runs out. To shoot after carrying your charge, be sure to let go of the swim button first before you let go of the trigger. If you do not make sure to do these things in the correct order, you will lose your charge before you shoot, leaving you surprised and disappointed, and you might get popped yourself. Step number 3. Maintain your ink shooting while tracking the target until the target pops. And lastly, swim back into the ink and get back behind cover. This marks the end of this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it helpful, and I hope it helped you understand how to get some more value out of the shooting rangers in the weapon testing area. Take care, everyone, and stay off the hook.